Hello, good morning and welcome to a snowy St. Moritz. We're in the Swiss Alps and on the morning when the four-man Bobsleigh World Championship competition gets underway, we have the beginnings of what may be 2 meters of snowfall forecast. Well, hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven. Sitting alongside me, I'm delighted to have Olympic medalist Helen Upperton from Canada. And Helen, this is one thing that nature throws at the sport occasionally. Changeable weather, and it's going to be very hard to second guess the conditions.
Yeah, outdoor venue, big field, and snow races are basically a free-for-all for anybody. It's going to be very interesting to see how this affects the field. Typically, we see the first few sleds have the best conditions. As the snow accumulates in the track, it tends to slow down, but we'll see what happens.
Well, normally that would be a good thing for the faster athletes, but here, because of the nature of this track, they choose to go last.
It is our best sliders, our highest ranked sliders are off at the end. This is the longest track in the world. It's 1,722 meters and very uncovered, so the snow is going to affect it quite a lot today. We're heading from the start down through these kink corners. These are long straightaways. The push is very important. You have to take as much velocity as you can, stay off those walls, stay nice and centered in the middle of these straightaways, build as much speed as you can heading into this big left-handed wall curve. It's a long corner, but there's very small pressures. The sleds will oscillate a bit. Heading into the Snake 1, Snake 2 transition, that transition is crucial to building speed. Sunny curve, big right-handed corner, heading down into Nash Dixon, named after 2 very famous British bobsledders, gold medalists from the Innsbruck Olympic Games. Horseshoe, the most famous corner in the track, big left-handed turn, telephone, shamrock right-handed combinations into a big left-handed Devil's Dyke. Again, a few pressures through this corner into Nameless. And then we have tree, bridge, leap, and Gunther Sachs, all right-handed combinations. We're heading out of Gunther Sachs with a velocity over 145 kilometers an hour, depending on the snow, and into Martineau and then Portago across the finish line. And this is rivaling Whistler as the fastest track in the world this year.
Well, unlike the other tracks, as you said, it is a natural ice barn. It is built from snowbanks, afresh every season. And so there are subtle differences. Track records are re-established every year because the track does change fractionally. Well, weather conditions, temperature, nobody's really interested about that. It's what is coming out of the sky that is turning the whole of this start area into a little sugar-coated winter wonderland. What it does do is slow the track down. What it also does is raise the ice temperature, and that makes it a little more skiddy. I mean, Helen, it does all sorts of different things. This is going to be nothing like the ice track that they have trained on.
Yeah, this is a very, very special track, and what is usually the case here is that the fastest sliders chose the last draw because the track typically gets faster. The ice is usually very cold, the temperature's cold. It's always sunny here, obviously, except for today. And they choose late off because the track gets faster. With warm ice conditions and a lot of snow, we should actually see the track potentially break down with the warm conditions and the snow accumulating in the track. So it's going to be a very interesting race, actually.
So the way it works is the World Cup Championship leader or points leader gets to choose where he wants to start, and habitually he will go right towards the end of the draw. And that means that the guys who are basically the tail enders will be starting first in the first heat. In the second heat, they go in ranking, so 20 down to 1, as we'd find in a normal World Cup race, and then the remaining sleds in order of their established ranking. Into the second day, and we go from first to last, and then the field is cut to just the fast 20 who go into the fourth heat to race for the medals. So with snow and potentially the slower runners going first and the faster guys going last, we may end up with, first of all, a topsy-turvy field, and secondly, a very much closer field into the second heat, and that could be very entertaining. I was talking to Patrice Servelle in Monaco after the draw. He was the second last to draw. There was only 2 numbers left. He chose 1 rather than 3. And I said, so you're going to go to bed tonight and pray for snow? And he said, yeah, maybe. Well, it looks like Prince Albert or somebody pulled some strings, because he may well have the best ice, and the fast front runners, the Germans, the Russians, the Brits, the Americans, the Canadians, are going to be waiting for the better part of an hour to see what the heavens produce for them. Let's get our four-man World Championship underway here in St. Moritz. First sled on the ice, the crash test dummies, if you like, who will show everybody what to expect. The Monaco sleds, driven by Patrice Servelle, with Boris Farr, Elie Lefort, and brand new brakeman from Ivory Coast, Brice Noir, behind them. It's his first ever World Championship start, a 5.30 getaway from them.
This is a very young crew. Patrice is a very experienced pilot, a lot of success in the World Cup, some podium finishes, and he's got a very young crew pushing behind him. So their start times are they should be a little bit off the pace, but he's the first sled off. Less snow in the track. We'll see how the others compare coming down behind him.
You'll see that over a lot of the track, the shades that are used to get the sun from coming in from the side have also been extended over the top to try and cover some of the corners away from the snow, particularly down here where it gets quick in amongst the trees. All of that wooden architecture being used to try and protect the track. And you'll also see track workers stepping in right behind the sled. They'll have 2 minutes before they have to get back out, and they'll be sweeping as fast as they can.
This is the kind of run we expect from Patrice. Very smooth lines. He's nice and parallel everywhere. He had a great horseshoe, and that is a crucial part to building speed. He taps there coming up the hill through Portago, but really nice run. I think he'll be happy with that.
Well, the big question for our race director, Tony Carlino, who's the track boss at Lake Placid as well with his other hat on, is whether or not this wet snow sticks on the visor. And there you go, Patrice's visor is nice and clear, because visibility when you're doing 85 miles an hour is vital. Yes, position number one.
Constant joker. Really, really nice drive lines in the horseshoe curve. He's high by the roof. He waits patiently. Nice exit. You can see here a small mistake as he comes up the hill from Martineau into Portago, but really good run from Patrice. First off, now he gets to wait for everybody else.
So he's waving to the crowds and thanking the heavens for a bit of snow. Everybody else, we normally go to 2-minute 10 interval. I think we're trying to go on a 2-minute interval, so a bit of a hurry-up offense. Ivan Sola of Croatia. Dražen Cilic, his number 2 brakeman, is also driving for Croatia. Matej Mečulik and Marko Padovan are the crew. Sola at 51 years old, the oldest man in the field. Former motorcycle racer as well. So clearly a man who's not averse to the odd thrill and possibly spill. I'm Martin Haven, alongside me, Olympic medalist Helen Upperton. And Helen, it is difficult for the driver. You've got to try and focus in what are near white-out conditions, but you have an innate knowledge of where you should be going, at least.
Yeah, these guys have been on the track for 2 weeks. They did their 2-man competition last week. It was a great race. They've been on the track a lot. Obviously, this is one of the favorite venues for all the pilots to come to. And the experienced drivers and athletes know that snow conditions are something you can't control. Everybody has the same problem. You just have to get on with it, do the best you can.
And of course, the problem with snow is not that it's snowing, it's that it never snows at exactly the same consistency for 2 hours. So 45 minutes before the start, it really looked like we weren't going to get a race at all, because it was pelting down, and then it's just soft, and as you can see now, there's barely a flake in the air, and that's what is going to make this first run a little bit of a lottery. Somebody's going to get near clear conditions, somebody's going to run into a little bit more snow. What they hope is that there's not great big patches of it on the track, because like when you're driving your own road car, if you hit standing water or patch of snow, you feel it decelerate that corner of the car, and that's exactly what will happen with the bobsled.
So Ivan Zola about half a second behind Patrice Servelle, who's our current leader. Nice run.
Not bad at all.
Coming down in second place.
Yeah, a little slower at the bottom of the track, but here, 142.5 kilometers an hour, just under 89 miles an hour. Now, if you were driving 89 on the highway in snow, even with winter tires, you'd have a couple of police cars in hot pursuit. Here, it is entirely accepted that that is a good thing to do.
You can see these athletes, it's very coordinated in 4-man. You have 4 very tall, very strong, powerful guys getting into an object basically the size of a bathtub. And when you think about how much coordination and practice and repetition that takes, it's quite remarkable.
There's Ivan Sola, lies second at the moment, and so far no major dramas. Tony Carlino was saying, well, we'll probably keep the race going until the coaches assault the box. Next up is Romania. This is Andreas Neagu, his dad Paul, a famous Romanian driver as well. Marin Iorgu, Paul Septimu Montian, a brand new man on the back of the sled, and Danat Moldovan, who drove in the 2-man sled as the brakeman.
5:20 is the fastest push we've seen so far. We should see pushes in the low 5s, maybe in the 4s, depending on the conditions.
Well, the 4-man record set in the team, no, that must have been in the Swiss Championships, 5th of January, there at Hefti, 4:99 push. But we've seen almost every record from the Swiss Championship beaten so far in this fortnight of World Championship action. Neagu in the green over Patrice Servelle in Monaco.
A little bit of a skiddy run. He had some problems coming out of Snake 2. Again, a little bit of instability out of Sunny Curve, flopping off of Telephone, High Line, and Shamrock. We'll see if he stays in the green here.
He's still got better speed than Patrice Servelle. It's a wild ride for the brakeman. He's 3/10 up, though. This young guy is the renaissance of Romanian bobsledding. 1930s, Romania and Belgium were both huge nations in the sport, and both have reignited their programs recently. 1:42.5, a fraction slower than Monaco. There's Paul Neagu, dad and coach. Bravo indeed. He looks very happy with that. It was a bit of a wild ride, Helen, but you know, sometimes wild can be fast, and controlled means you're having to steer too much to get that nice line.
It can be, and also you have to keep in mind that runners and sleds play a big part. Equipment is a huge part. This is a nice high line in Horseshoe. You can see all of the brakemen lined up perfectly. A little bit of a wobble coming out of Horseshoe, but there's a lot of pressure in these corners. He's a bit late off of Telephone, flopping off nose away, but he corrects it quite well as he heads into Shamrock.
Well, these are big old trucks to get down any ice track, and this is one of the sweetest in the business. You'll hear as the really impressive sleds come down that it is almost silent. Michael Cerizet in Belgium now in a hired Vrba sled. Now, this is a new sled for him for this four-man World Championships. Sebastian Trille, Leo Van Dorn, and the returning Michael de Zutter behind him. De Zutter broke his collarbone in a crash in the US earlier in the season, and only returned a couple of weeks ago. 54.5 km/h top speed.
You can see how low this driver is sitting in the cowling. It's all about aerodynamics and foreman, especially on a long track like St. Moritz, where you're going to accumulate speed as you head down these long straightaways in the track.
Well, he's not a short guy either. He's fully 6'2", Michael, so he's really making the effort to get himself tucked as way out of the air as possible. And you think, well, really, what's the point? Well, they do it in Formula One because it's good for aerodynamics, and they do it here as well for exactly the same reason.
This is a little bit of a low line in Horseshoe. He's going to build a bit of pressure. 106.7 is an okay velocity, but he's still in the red right now. He's behind our leader.
Best speed we've seen, but the gaps come down from 39 to 2900s. Could be down towards the teens by the time he gets the top speed trap. 144 km/h. He is the fastest, and he's closing on Andreas Neagu at 800ths of a second.
Close, very close. He picked up a lot of time in the bottom of the track with that great velocity. And it's not just important how the pilot is riding aerodynamically. Foreman, you have three guys behind you. You want them tucked in. Their heads are usually buried between the shoulder blades of the guy in front of them. And they practice this for years. The top crews, you'll see them. They look like they're attached to one another.
There's Michael with the flames on the helmet, and the crew again trying to drive off almost in step to try and just maximize the power away from the blocks.
You can see the number 2 guys, a little bit of trouble dropping in, but they get in, but just as they go around that first kink curve, snow falling off the sides of the track as they rumble through Martineau and Portago.
Well, that's the wash, the wake left by the sled, and that's why aerodynamics are important, because there's a lot of moving and a lot of speed. And there is the sled from Heath Spence of Australia. They gave me a team t-shirt this morning that I will wear with pride, especially when we're tonking the Aussies during the Ashes. Well, their sled, Claude, being watched over last night by Jerry the Gecko, the team mascot. Let's see if they can produce the sort of start that they want. This is a rented sled. Their normal sled is back home in Calgary.
Bit of a skid through that first kink curve. Not the fastest push time, but Heath just did a really good job of correcting the instability as they came around that kink. He's heading nice and straight and parallel into wall curve. You can see the drive lines through the snow here. If you look at the track, the straightaways especially, you can see the lines that have been produced by the sleds. Actually, the best pilots strategically try to follow the lines that have already been created in the snow to create less friction, maintain fast downtimes.
Well, this is a heavy old sled. It's a lot heavier than the minimum weight. Unfortunately, that means that they're pushing a lot more than they really want to be.
Nice line out of Horseshoe. 105.9 is a little bit slower, and Heath Spence is currently in the red right now. He's behind our leaders.
moment in 4th spot. The Aussies want to get a good run under their belts now, and they, like the early front runners, will be hoping that the snow returns and just keeps things slowing down a little. 1:42.3 again, a little bit out of touch with the front runners. 4th position ahead of Ivan Sola.
Yeah, there was a bit of instability, a little bit of loss of control in some of those. He had a small skid coming out of Gunther Sachs, between Leap and Gunther Sachs, but not too bad of a run. 3 more heats, that's the great thing about World Championships. It's 4 heats over 2 days, so you get some more chances to clean up some of these mistakes. You can see as a little bit of a late entry, comes in on the left side in Horseshoe, but he gets a nice line. Good timing with the steer, the runners bringing him down. Good timing, good position in the straightaway.
Well, now, in weather like this, Helen Upton, you might end up with a real confusion over what runners to choose. And actually, if you've only got a choice of 1 or 2 sets, you're probably a lot better off than some of the others who'll spend hours agonising over it. Got a brand new name to conjure with here. The 2nd Italian driver we've never seen in World Cup action before. Lucas Schnitzer, Daniel Tanarotto, Luca Pagin and William Frulani behind him. So welcome to, well, not even yet a World Cup race, but straight into the World Championships for this young man.
55 kilometers an hour velocity off the push is pretty good velocity for this new young driver and his crew. This is a nice track. Lots of the drivers have been here before. Whether or not they've been on the World Cup or competed in a World Championships, this pilot has probably raced here and trained here through Europa Cup and through the development circuit. A lot of the Europeans travel around the tracks, practicing the lines. Being a bobsleigh driver is all about experience and developing the precision it takes to get down these tracks parallel and clean. There's a small bump on the wall coming into Devil's Dyke.
2nd place at the moment, 1300s behind Romania's Andreas Neagu.
Very close to that right wall, out of tree.
1:42.6, the Romanians had 1:42.5, going to be close at the line. He's in 3rd place behind Romania and Belgium. So top 3 covered by 1400ths of a second. Helen, this is a strange field, going with some of the newest and youngest drivers first, and then kind of working towards a climax, if you like, with the expected front runners towards the end.
You can see this entry into Horseshoe here, climbing. He actually bumps the roof. This is the first sled I think we've seen that's touched the roof in Horseshoe. It probably will not be the last, I imagine. You want to get as much height as possible without touching that roof. What happens is it hits the bunk, sends the sled down a little bit too early, earlier than you'd like, and it can cause some problems at the exit of the corner.
Well, these guys were down at Horseshoe yesterday watching a historic race with the old Feyerabend sled sideways through there, making a mental note not to try that in a modern format. Loic Costerg of France, Roman Heinrich, Franck Ribet and Jérémy Botterin. An 8th place World Cup finish in 2-man and a 10th place in 4-man this season for this first-year rookie. Costerg only been driving for now, this is his 3rd year on ice, and a big push from the crew, 5:18, that's the fastest we've seen so far.
Yeah, good push. You can see that push handle right there. Maybe it's lost its elastic, it's bouncing around a bit. As long as it stays in the sled, you don't want that hitting any of the short walls. It's just going to slow the sled down.
Costerg in the lead from the start.
Loic being coached by the legendary French pilot Bruno Méjean.
They had good speed at the start, best first corner momentum. A little bit knocked out of line coming into Horseshoe, but he gets a good exit as a result. Still a couple of hundreds in front, 106.4. That seems to be where everybody's maxing out at the moment. Some
small problems through Nash Dixon, brushing the wall before Horseshoe, which I thought was going to produce some trouble. A bit of a late entry, but he had a really good line, good exit.
400s in the lead, now up to a 1/10 of a second, 1:43.3, that's the 2nd quickest speed we've seen, 89.1 miles an hour, and they're still accelerating hard at that stage down into Martina and Portago. And look at the snow, the brakeman will get out looking like Nanook of the North as he hauls on the brakes.
There's usually a cover over the brakes so that this doesn't happen. The snow is just spraying up in the brakeman's face. Good thing he's wearing a visor.
Well, it is a winter sport, and they look like they've been rolling around in the snow. That sled will be full of snow, and they want to get some out before it gets weighed.
As you can see, a small mistake coming out of Sonny, tapping the wall. And again here, going in through Nash-Dixon, it's usually an accumulation of mistakes. You don't want to fall behind here. This is a very fast track. Nice exit out of Portago. You can see the athletes lift up as the brakeman pulls the brakes, snow spraying everywhere.
Well, bearing in mind they are just wearing Lycra, you know, at least it's not minus 25 out. It's only just around freezing. So our French crew have the lead as we welcome Michel Klingler of Liechtenstein to the track. Bruno Meyerhans, Jürgen Bergens, Thomas Duer are the crew. Again, second World Championships for Liechtenstein. They've only raced once in the World Cup.
54.7, not the fastest velocity. Actually, the crew ran it quite deep. You have to be very careful how far you run here in four-man. You got to get all four of those athletes in and down before you hit that kink curve. And as we get through the field, the teams that have been sliding together for years and years, you're going to see the Russians, the top Americans, the top Canadians, the German teams, how fast and in sync those crew members all load into the sled together, creating a better velocity off of the push.
In the red, he is currently 36 hundredths of a second behind, relatively inexperienced.
105.9 kilometers an hour. The fastest velocity we've seen out of Horseshoe is over 106 kilometers per hour. He's 4/10 back.
That is still 66 miles an hour. And out of Devil's Dyke, you really start to pick up speed through these four fast right-handers. 142.5 kilometers an hour, 88.6 through Martineau and Portago, and across the line in sixth place, a 107.70.
Nice parallel lines in the bottom, but not a lot of speed. I actually saw him kind of taking lines that were outside of the other lines that have been developed in the track. You can see them in the snow that's slowly accumulating in the straightaways. You want to try to follow the lines that have gone down before you. And even without the snow, that's the case here, actually. You can see the ice and the snow spraying up from these athletes' shoes as they're pushing over the 50 meters. This is the exit of Sonny curve. He's got a bit of a late pressure, keeping him to the left as he goes into Nash, bumping the wall as he heads into Dixon because of that late entry in the previous curve.
Well, look how little snow is falling now. That means that maybe the first couple of runners are actually at a deficit. Next up is the Dutch sled of Edwin van Calker. Now, he's really got to try and capitalize on this. A nice early start. The track has not yet degraded. It's been polished a little by a few sets of runners. Dutchman could explode here. Yannick Greiner, Sybren Jansma, Jeroen Pik are the tall men. Jansma on the right-hand side of the sled as we look at it.
This is usually a very, very fast-pushing crew. 5:11, that's significantly the quickest time, and a 56.3 kilometers per hour. You can tell that this crew has had a lot of practice, a lot of experience pushing together. That's a really good push time.
But these guys should be in the top 10 fastest starts, no matter where they are in the field. They're very drilled, as you said, and very quick guys. And Edwin, he can really drive up a storm in two-man and four-man. Quarter of a second up already as he gets to Sonny. Woo.
Bit of a bump through Nash-Dixon. We've seen a couple other sleds do that line as well so far this morning. Really, really nice exit out of Horseshoe. We should see a big speed here, and we do. 107 kilometers an hour.
Well, the very fastest sleds might be topping 109 at that stage, but this is good momentum so far for Van Calker. He's just streaking away from the field. Low start draw because he's had hamstring problems, missed the race in Whistler, had another couple of races where he had to sit in, barely finished in the top 20, and that's why he got a low draw, because he wasn't high up in the rankings, but that is a good run, 106.11.
And that's what we expect to see from a pilot like Edwin van Calker. He's a great driver, he's had a lot of success, and like you said, not a very good start position. His nemesis is usually consistency, so we'll see if he can maintain runs like that over the next 3 heats. This is a late entry into Nash. It's what produces this hit on the left wall. He slides off of the exit of Nash as he heads into Dixon. But really, really great line in Horseshoes. Nice and high. You can see he pauses at the top, at the apex of the corner, and accelerates the sled out with a 107 kilometer per hour speed.
And that diving off the height gives you extra acceleration. That's what the sport's all about, trying not to lose speed. Well, next up for Serbia, Vuk Radjenovic, Orostegel, Nikola Milenkovic, and Damian Zlatnar on the back of Vuk's sled. Watched his wife Astrid race in the women's race last year, last week, of course, when he was racing in the two-man as well.
We're going to see if this Romanian team can produce a velocity like the Dutch. We're looking for a 56.3 km/h push velocity.
That was close. That's a decent start, 55.7. Just 800 slower than the Dutch crews.
Wobbling a bit down the straightaway, drifting a little close to that right wall, but keeping it straight. It's very important to make the most of your push time.
These guys, now that the air is relatively clear and the track's not filling up fast with snow, have got to really make the most of this first run to try and find a good result. See the brake man at the back, his hood on his suit is billowing away behind him.
He forgot to put it up before he put his helmet on, and that's going to affect the aerodynamics. 106.5 km/h is okay. We saw the Dutch team come through there at 107.
He's the second fastest at that point. Yeah, that hood is just filling with air, and it's all costing him a few hundredths of a second, and although that might not sound like a lot, that might mean a position.
Yeah, the sliding sports are won and lost by hundredths of a second, and all these little details matter a lot. They're probably going to have to review this video, make sure that doesn't happen again.
Now, he's 100th of a second behind France's Loic Costerg, in third rather than second. Some sliders have the hood under their helmet, some tuck it down the back.
I used to cut mine off, actually, to make sure I never forgot.
It's the first thing I thought of. Well, if you're not going to wear it, why do you keep it on the suit? Cut it off.
You can see this nice high line in horseshoe. He steers a little bit sooner than some of the sleds we've seen before, creating some pressure, very diagonal, line into telephone, bumping the right wall, coming out of Martineau. We've seen a few sleds do that as well so far in this field.
Trying to get around those two corners at over 85 miles an hour. That requires ultimate finesse. Well, not thrilled with that run, Vuk, but next up is Mali, the GB2 four-man sled. Lamin Deen, Dave Coleman, Ben Simons, and Andy Matthews are the crew. They've been looking for a name for this sled. It's an ex-Lee Johnson sled, and they came up with Mali. And let's see if they're jamming today. First two Great Britain sleds. Big day for British Skeleton in the women's race yesterday. Shelley Rudman becoming the first ever British woman to claim a gold medal. 5:19 start, but a big skid there for Lamin Deen.
Yeah, 5:19 push time. I think the number 2 or 3 guy had a bit of a hard time getting his arms in. They were all sitting down, but I think the crew members weren't quite settled yet as they went through that first king curve. You can see the lines from the previous sleds accumulating and developing in the track. That's from the snow, and that's also just from the frost in the track.
800s behind the Dutch at the 50-meter mark. They're now 0.3 of a second behind. That big skid costs you so much.
Yeah, if you have a powerful crew and a good push time, you have to make sure that you're straight and off the walls in those long straightaways, otherwise you lose all your velocity.
Good speed, just 1/10 of a kilometre an hour down on the Dutch, which is the fastest sled so far. Flopped a little bit off horseshoe, but is picking up speed. He has not lost a second or a fraction even to the Dutch now since Nash and Dixon. Little bit slower, 1:43.9. The Dutch were 1:44.7. This should still leave him in second place. It does. Well, Lee Johnson on the right, the former driver of this sled, and you saw Pete Gunn on the left, the British coach. Lee developing the young drivers program. Second spot at the moment. They would have preferred to be in front, but that skid in the first kink has cost them a little bit of time.
Want to see the runners maintain contact with the ice. The whole back end of the sled has come out. That's from mistiming from the side pushers and the brakemen. There's a lot of force going into the sled. This is the late exit off of horseshoe. You can see how much pressure he had. The head's bouncing back and forth on the crew as he heads into telephone curve. And again, a high line out of Portago.
Again, very different ice conditions to how they trained, and it's going to take one run to really get a feel for the runners properly, what they're doing, how they're gripping. Next up is our 12th starter in the field, Dawid Kupczyk for Poland, Daniel Zaleski, Pavel Moroz, and Marcin Navarra are the crew.
5:11's our fastest push time. Really nice load from that crew in a 5:09. This is the first push we've seen under a 5:10. If they can carry this velocity, keep nice straight lines heading into wall curve through the top portion of the track, they should stay in the lead.
200s up on the Dutch crew of Edwin van Calker at the start. Off wall without losing time.
Bit of a skid from Snake 1 to Snake 2, and again, not the best transition from Snake 2 to Sunny, but this was a really nice entry. We've seen a lot of sleds hit the wall between Nash and Dixon, and he's nice and straight, maintaining nice parallel lines.
Didn't have the greatest time in the two-man, but he does like the four-man better. He's produced some good results here in the past in St. Moritz as well.
107.6 is a great velocity coming out of Horseshoe.
500s up on the Dutch.
Slowly producing a little bit more of an advantage. These are really nice lines. It's going to be very close in the bottom portion of the track, 144.2 kilometers per hour.
Half a kilometre now down on the Dutch. He's got to keep it clean to the line. 200s in the lead. Well, the Poles will be happy with that, no question. To be in front of Van Calker does mean that they've done a very good job. Edwin's got a lowly start draw because of a bit of a tough season physically, but he is a good top 10 driver, and that's a good run from Dawid Kupczyk.
Yeah, you can see the crew congratulating each other. This was really nice. He's very close to that right wall, but you want a nice middle early entry into Horseshoe. He's on a bit of a lower line than some of the sleds we've seen, but he had a nice exit. There are three components to being able to win bobsleigh races: fast push, good equipment, and a nice drive. That was a good job from the Polish team.
Dawid Kupczyk, Edwin van Calker, and Lamin Deen are the top three. The snow just about finishing as we get to the first of our German sleds. The two-man and four-man junior world champion, Francesco Friedrich, won gold in the two-man race last weekend. And now with Axel Christ, Gino Gerhardi, and Torsten Margis behind him, is looking to try and do the same in the four-man, and what a sensation it would be if he could do that. Become the senior world champion in both disciplines as well as the junior, and what a good load from the crew off a 5:01 getaway.
That is a huge push. That will be one of the fastest push times we see, but he tapped the left wall coming through the first kink. Maintaining good straight lines here, going into wall curve.
Well, that kink is so vital. If you're a brakeman and you're getting to the kink and you haven't quite got in, it would probably be better actually just to freeze rigidly and then drop in on the straight, because any skid there is really horrible.
It is nice exit coming through Sunny. Nash Dixon here. This is crucial. Good. You need a really nice entry into Horseshoe. Good high line and a lot of acceleration coming out. He's 3/10 in the lead right now with a huge speed, 108.3.
Well, again, hasn't done a full World Cup season, so didn't get one of the beneficial start draws, but actually, this kid doesn't need that much assistance. He just started and drove better than anyone in the two-man competition.
Building on his lead up to 4/10 and 145 at the bottom of this track.
2001, Christoph Langen took 2- and 4-man gold for Germany, and there he is celebrating as his young prodigy gets a track record to open the competition for Germany.
I was curious to see how this World Championship win in two-man affected Francesco Friedrich. You have a lot of pressure, you put a lot of expectations on yourself, and he's still such a young new pilot. This was a phenomenal push from these powerful German brakemen. 5:01 is going to be one of the quickest times we see. You can see the synchronization of the load, all those guys in and down very quickly. Little bit of trouble getting their arms in with the push bars as they go through the kink, but really, really great velocity.
Axel Christ, the man at 2, headbutting the driver in the back of the head. You can see Francesco's helmet being bounced against the front of the cowling, but a great drive. And again, no matter what grumbling went on about the sled and the runners, this kid can drive up a storm.
He's got this track dialed in for sure.
Milan Jagnešák of Slovakia next up. Martin Tezovic, Vladimir Simic, and Adam Zavacki are the crew of the Slovakian sled. Again, another older driver, businessman who pays for the whole kit and caboodle himself, runs the team so he can come out and enjoy his bobsledding, but he takes it deadly seriously as well. These guys are not just here to admire the scenery.
Milan, one of the friendliest, most, lovely guys on the circuit. Everybody loves working with him. He gets a lot of help and support. He's a small nation, and like you said, he does a lot to make sure his crew enjoys the sport.
Well, Helen, if you can't love this, then there really is no point in being part of it, because it's a pretty nitty-gritty business and a lot of hard work and a lot of cold and early starts.
Milan is a very experienced pilot. He's got a lot of runs under his belt. He's usually very consistent. He's 7/10 behind right now, but he's following the current world champion, world junior and senior world champion in two-man, Francesco Friedrich.
Well, Friedrich is 4/10 clear of anybody else, and so we're now not looking at what Friedrich has done, but where Milan fits in with everybody else that he expects to be racing against. 143.7, again, long way shy of the Germans, but actually that's one of the best speeds we've seen from the other sleds, and 5th position, so 4th among his peers, you've got to say, ahead of Loic Costerg of France and behind Lamin Deen of Great Britain.
We're starting to transition now out of the sort of less experienced pilots into the more competitive portion of the field where they're not fighting for top 20 to maintain that fourth run starting position. We're looking to have competitive sleds now, fast pushes. This is a good push from this crew. They've had a lot of practice together. They're in and down before this kink. You got to get in and down, push bars in. You can see the brakeman struggling to get his arms in the back of the sled. They're big guys fitting into a very small space.
Next up for Canada, Justin Kripps, the Canada 3 sled, former brakeman turned driver, with Tim Randall, James McNaughton, Graham Rinholm behind him, some of the guys formerly in the Canada 2 crew of Chris Spring. The Canadians, like the Americans, moving the brakemen around to try and get the fastest, strongest combination for all 3 sleds. Well, just to pile everything into one and have all your eggs in one basket.
Nice load from this crew, really good load. Kripps having a little trouble out of that first kink, but 5:09 push time is not a bad push time considering this crew has never actually raced together until this week. They've been training together all week. The crews have been shuffled around between Canada 2 and Canada 3.
Graham was in for his new headshot with Tim Randall the other day, and he was saying, I feel naked without a mustache. He said, I'm going to have to start growing another one.
This is a good run from Justin Kripps. He's one of the strongest pushing pilots in the field. He started driving after the Vancouver Olympics, where he finished 5th as a crew member with Pierre Luder's big hit out of Horseshoe. He had a very late steer.
That's taken a little bit of speed off, 106 kilometers an hour just about. Still 66 miles an hour. Half a second back on the leader, but this is going to leave him 2nd, 3rd maybe. Let's see what speed he's got at the bottom.
Can see the crew bouncing around a little bit in the back of the sled. 143.5 kilometers is a little bit off the pace.
4th place at the line. Yes, he is. 106.33. Coach Tom Delahunty will take that, I would think, as an opening foray.
I think that mistake, well, he had a little bit of trouble out of the first kink and a big hit coming out of Horseshoe, and that cost so much speed in the bottom portion of the track. You're just going to continue to bleed time when you make a mistake that significant.
You've got to underline again, because of the warm temperatures and the snow, the track is very different from how they trained on it. It's like a race car driver practicing in the dry and racing in the rain.
You can see he's very high. He's above everybody else's lines, a little bit too long, and then he steers quite aggressively down, driving his sled into the left wall. The ice, you know, flying off that shore wall. These sleds carry so much momentum, and you kill the speed when you make a mistake like that, hitting that wall.
Apologies to the guys for the rough landing off Horseshoe. Next up is Chris Spring. He's got Jean-Nic Carrière, Cody Sorensen and Sam Giguère, half the crew, Québécois, football players.
They're expecting a big push from the crew. It's the reason why they switched the teams around this week. It's the biggest race of the year.
Another
5:04,
great
good
start
push.
and a great load. Again, a little wobble off the first kink.
Chris Spring had a pretty good week of training, both 2-man and 4-man. He's really enjoying the track here in St. Moritz.
Of course, Helen, what happens in that first kink, the more sleds go down, there's 700 kilos of metal polishing that glass effect on the track.
Yeah, it gets skiddier and skiddier, harder to control, and also with those guys loading in the back, if they're not in and down as you come through that first kink, it's very hard for the pilot to control it. Chris Spring currently behind a little bit and making the same mistake as Justin Kripps, actually coming off a Horseshoe late into that left wall with a 106.9, but good speed at the bottom, very close to Friedrich.
Yeah, full kilometre an hour quicker than Kripps. 2nd place, 2400s back after that tap that Friedrich didn't make and the skid that Friedrich didn't make. Let's see where he can finish at the line. Can he hold that advantage? 143.9. Friedrich was 145. German FES sled was absolutely flying, but second spot, a 1:06 dead for Chris Spring, and I would think, like Justin Kripps, he knows what he's got to tidy up in the second heat. He'll be happy with that.
Yeah, pretty good run from Chris Spring. Also, again, a new crew in the back. These guys have not pushed together until this week. A lot of teams trying to go for it, with the World Championships being the biggest event of the year. You put it all on the line. This was a great start from this team. You can see how much power. Sam Jaguar actually very low and bent over the sled on the back. It's his first season. He came in very late. He plays professional football for the Hamilton Ticats in Canada. Big hit out of horseshoe, bouncing off the wall, but still he had a good velocity in the bottom half of the track.
There is the Springer, and the sled Phoenix is the one that was wrecked in that horrible crash in Altenburg last year. They've rebuilt it. Oskars Ķibermanis now, another young sensation. He was a medalist in the Junior World Championships in 2-man and 4-man for Latvia. Uga Zalims, another Latvian driver. Ravis Broks and Jānis Strenga are the crew. And again, like Francesco Friedrich, our current leader, Ķibermanis, with another year or two driving under his belt, could be a massive threat for medals.
Yeah, 5:04 push time, but negated by a big skid coming through the first kink. You could actually see him turning the runners, trying to regain control of the sled. He's going to lose some of the velocity, but that was a great push. And like you said, young driver, new driver. This Latvian program is developing with so much power and force at the start. I think that they're going to be a huge threat in the future.
Started driving in 2011. We've only just left 2012. That's how fresh he is. It's his first time ever in Samaret.
And that was an excellent line out of horseshoe, and it is shown by the speed, 107.9, huge velocity.
Second at the start, he's dropped to third, but he is coming back at Chris Spring of Canada.
Gonna have to maintain these straight parallel lines, keep it off the walls, and he's slowly picking up speed, 144.6, good velocity.
BTC sled built in Latvia as well, and that's second place for him, 105.91, 900s ahead of Chris Spring and Canada. That is a very good run.
Yeah,
given the mistake at the start, he really recuperated well from that.
Young pilot competing in his first ever World Championships. Great pusher, great crew behind him. The Latvian program is dominant at the start. You can see how powerful these athletes are pushing this very, very heavy sled over 50 meters. It's so important for these athletes to get in and down, all the push bars in, going through those kink curves. Takes a little bit of a high line here in Shamrock, brushing the wall as he goes into Devil's Dyke. Oh, I'm sorry, mixed up the corners. Tree into bridge curve.
Well, there is Oskars, and you can see from their kit and their sled how well sponsored they are in the Latvian program. Next up, Simone Bertazzo of Italy. Simone Fontana, Constantino Ughi, and Francesco Costerg back on the 4-man. Now, Francesco pushed the first heat only in 2-man and was then substituted, so hopefully he is now fully fit after pulling a muscle on day one of 2-man racing.
Simone Bertazzo, this Italian crew, very experienced. Simone Bertazzo has had a lot of success here in this track, including winning a World Championship medal the last time the event was hosted here in 2007. He's currently in the red based off of the push time and the velocity going through these first curves. You should see, with the type of pilot he is, he should reel in the time, but Francesco Friedrich has been driving so well on this track. They had a great start.
7th at the start. What they had at the start, though, was a good exit from the first corner, and if you start a little slower but drive it tidier, then that works too. Right up on the woodwork out of horseshoe, 107.5, very good velocity. That dive late off the corner has helped him.
There was a very high line in horseshoe, but with the experience that this pilot has, he knew exactly what to do, not to overreact. He kept the sled off the wall, heading into telephone.
Up to 5th place now, 145.1, very good speed. Second quickest, as you expect from Bertazzo in this Italian sled, and he moves up to 4th position.
You can see coach there, Wolfgang Stamfer, very good pilot, builds his own equipment, very involved in the technology and equipment development for this Italian program.
And Antonio Tartaglia, who's their high-performance coach, he was a World Championship winning brakeman as well in his time. all about synchronous pushing and keeping the sled going forward rather than up, so you lose a fraction of the power that you're putting into it if you raise it off the ice.
Middle left entry, that creates this high line and horseshoe. He actually touches the roof. Really good reaction by not overreacting. Good exit, nice entry into telephone curve, and a good run from Simone Bertazzo from Italy.
Gee, I wonder which nation's at the line right now. Cowbells and the red and white flag of Switzerland for Rico Peter, Thomas Ruff, Patrick Böschlinger and Simon Friedrich. Some very experienced brakemen in that crew. World Championship medalist behind in the white cap, Eric Allard. Another great driver in his time who's just taken over at Christmas coaching the Swiss operation. Rico putting in some really good performances in the two-man competition. The Swiss have been really looking forward to four-man. They're the defending world champions here in St. Moritz.
You see the brakeman getting that right-hand push bar in as they come through the kink. Rico Peter having very, very good velocities and good times in training in a few of the different sessions this week, so I expect him to be a threat in this competition.
They started 400s behind Oskars Ķibermanis, but had better momentum and didn't have the big skid. The gaps here are tiny, Helen Upperton, just 700s behind the fastest starter, which is our race leader. So every 100th is absolutely vital.
It is, and we're going to see the field close more and more as we get into these top sleds. It's separated by hundredths of a second. Tiny mistakes cost a lot on this track. 108.5 is the fastest velocity we've seen out of horseshoe. It's what you expect from a home field pilot. He's got so much experience on this track. The track is built by hand in December. The Swiss team's been on this track as much as possible, knowing that the biggest race of the year is at their home venue.
And listen to the sled. Absolutely silent except for the rush of air over it. 145.4.
It's closing in.
90.5 miles an hour. He is 400ths off the lead. Owen Taylor there, one of the other brakemen, and the coach liking that run for Switzerland.
Great run from Rico Peter. That crew is going to be very happy with that first run. Gives him a great chance, a good position as he heads into the second heat and leading into tomorrow's two runs.
Top speed at both of the high-speed traps. That unique shape of the Citius sled made to cleave the air at high speed specifically for this track.
Yeah, this is the combination of right-handed corners of leap, tree, bridge, sacks of 145.4, fastest velocity at a horseshoe, fastest velocity at the bottom. Great run from the Swiss home team.
Rico Peter looking happy with that. Next up is a new driver for the USA, Cody Basue, the teenager from Lake Placid. Jesse Beckham, Johnny Quinn, and Nick Taylor are the crew. This is USA 3. Corey Butler was the USA 3 driver in the two-man, with Cody getting his break in the four-man. It's a massive opportunity stroke pressure for the teenager to be competing for the first time in Europe at the most historic track in the World Championships. A 5:19 getaway, a little squirrely off that first kick.
Yeah, a bit of trouble for this crew. Again, new pilot, the crew being shuffled around a little bit. They don't have a lot of experience sliding together. And Cody Basue is so young, following in the footsteps of John Napier. Started bobsledding when he was, still a kid, basically. So we expect to see great things from him in the future, but he's an inexperienced pilot, had a great season so far in the America's Cup, is ahead of Corey Butler in points, and that's why they gave him an opportunity to race here.
Nice line through horseshoe and smooth exit, and that will help to add to the speed. 107.3, that's not bad. You've got to imagine there's just a little bit of nerves jangling with Cody this morning. It's not training anymore. This is the big show. This is his spotlight.
This is really nice lines here. A bit of a high line coming out of Sachs, bumping the wall going into Martineau, but really, really good performance from this young driver.
10th spot, 106.56.
Well, 10th place isn't too bad.
10th place isn't too bad. We've still got getting on for half our field to go. That sled 20 of 34. See some of the brakemen with visors on their helmets, thoroughly steamed up as they get out. Jesse Beckham at 2.
First World Championship, Senior World Championship competition for Cody Basue. This crew being put together over the course of the week. There was a lot of push testing, a lot of shuffling around of the guys. You can tell they're having a bit of a hard time. Those push bars stayed out through the first kink. This is the bottom portion of the track. He's got a high line in sacks, bumping the right wall. Gonna lose a little bit of velocity as he skids up that uphill section.
Had a little bit of extra training time after the New Year break here in St. Moritz, but still probably less than a dozen trips under his belt in his life. Slightly more for the veteran Austrian Jürgen Loacker, with Matthias Adolf, Markus Semmer, and Martin Laškovic arriving this week to join the back of the four-man crew, one of his favourite brakemen.
5:16, a little bit off the pace. Jürgen Loacker, a very experienced pilot in this field. 56.0 kilometers an hour. It's a competitive velocity, which is so important down these long, long straightaways. Coming through wall curve, it's very light pressure. The drivers are very gently squeezing to try to prevent oscillations in that turn. You can see nice exit from Sonny. We want to see him stay parallel through Nash Dixon. He does a great job. You can tell how many runs this driver has under his belt. 108.8 is a huge velocity.
That is the fastest, quicker even than Rico Peter. He's only 9th at the moment, but that's going to change. Now he's 5th at the next split. He could be 3rd by the bottom of the track.
This is a beautiful run. Such parallel lines. We don't see him steering at all. 145.6, again, a big velocity at the bottom.
Very fast indeed. 2nd place, 3rd place it is. Quarter of a second back, just from Francesco Friedrich and Rico Peter, who are just 400s apart at the top of the pile.
That was such a nice, smooth run from Jürgen Loacker. I was amazed. It was so parallel, so nice. That's why he picked up so much speed. That speed out of Horseshoe was huge, 108.8 kilometers an hour. Great shot of the spikes. The spikes for bobsleigh and skeleton are very specialized. Hundreds of very, very sharp spikes, allowing them to dig into the ice to push that very heavy sled over 50 meters. This was a great run through Horseshoe. Nice high line, a few inches off the roof. You can see the runners turn a bit. 108.8, fastest speed we've seen so far in the track in this middle section.
And he was fastest down the bottom as well, Jürgen Loacker. Valner sleds the Austrians build always really hit the high numbers here in St. Moritz. Next up, Nick Cunningham with Adam Clark, Andy Dreibel, and Chris Vogt on the back of the USA 2 sled, the National Guardsmen. 2 National Guard athletes on this National Guard sled.
Good load, great push time, 5:03, huge push time. Gives Nick Cunningham a chance to have some good velocity here in the top portion of the track.
200 slower than Francesco Friedrich, who's the fastest starter. Those guys will be really, really impressed with that. And the load was neat enough, he only had the tiniest little slide.
Nick Cunningham having a good run so far, only 500s behind our leaders. Bit of a bump on the wall from Nash Dixon. We've seen a few sleds have some trouble with that transition. Brushing the roof through Horseshoe, a little bit of a skid into Telephone. He's dropping time, 107.0 kilometers an hour.
107.0, the leader Francesco Friedrich had 108.3 there. Cunningham, his first time ever in Europe, his first fortnight on this track in St. Moritz.
Bit of a rough transition from lead into Sachs. He's brushing the wall here, heading into Martin. A 141 is not a good bottom velocity at all.
Nobody had a lot of problems from Horseshoe on down, tucks his head under the line, and what could have been maybe 2nd place ends up as 9th spot. But again, he will learn so much from that trip down the track that he can adjust his lines for the second. And when it was slowest, he was on the money. As it got quicker and quicker, the steers were just getting a fraction behind.
That's too bad. They had the 2nd fastest push time, dropping so much in the track on the way down. He's going to be disappointed with that. You can see here he bumps the roof through Horseshoe. That's a very high line. You actually want to be a few inches below that. High line here, coming through trees, bumping, skidding as he heads into bridge.
And we are talking like race car driving, hundreds of a second of difference between getting it right and just getting it wrong. Francesco Friedrich, our race leader from Rico Peter and Jürgen Loacker of Austria. Jan Vrba of the Czech Republic with Dominik Dvořák, Jan Stoklaska and Michal Vacek on the back of the sled. The 23rd of our 34 sleds.
Jan Vrba, 5:08 push time, had a smoking fast run in the last day of training. poised and ready for a really good World Championship event if he can put together 4 good heats.
Again, this is a track that often seems to gel with Jan Vrba. He had a good time in the 2-man, and he again has posted great results in the 4-man before. He should definitely be thinking top 10 to 15 positions.
Coming out of Snake 2, a little close to that right wall. Good exit out of Sunny, staying nice and parallel through Nash Dixon. We've seen a few sleds brushing that wall in that transition.
Well, 5th place at the start, still in 5th place at 107.9. That's good velocity as well.
This is a nice run so far from Jan Vrba, but no big mistakes. He's really parallel on the track. Same race, that is the most important thing for building speed, especially in these 4-man bobsleighs where any mistake just loses all that momentum. These sleds are so heavy.
144.9, again, good speed from the Czech sled. And across the line, 3rd place. He's so smooth, and one of his greatest strengths, Helen Upton, is his consistency. He can just get the lines right time and time again.
Yeah, and unlike the World Cup where it's only 2 heats, World Championship in the Olympic Games in bobsleigh and skeleton is 4 accumulated runs over 2 days, so consistency is actually a huge part of being successful.
It's a modified Singer sled that the Czechs have built themselves.
You can see this is a really, really nice, smooth line in horseshoe. He gets very, very close to that roof. That's what we want to see. He starts his exit a little bit aggressively. He has a bit of pressure, keeping him middle, right. I'd like to see him more parallel, a little bit earlier onto telephone, but such a smooth run from this pilot.
You can see the sleds there lying in the cold with their runners up to make sure that no work's going on them. As the first of our Russian drivers, Dmitry Abramovich, gets the line. He's got the crew of Alexei Pushkarev, Dmitry Stepushkin, and Alexei Voyevoda. Stepushkin and Voyevoda, both formerly members of the Russian 1 crew of Alexander Zubkov, but having to move the crews around, move the weight around to make the weight legal for everybody. And look at Voyevoda on the back handles of this sled. What a huge Goliath of a man he is.
That was a great load from that Russian crew, all dropping into the sled at the same time, and the velocity is showing it. 56.4 kilometers an hour is a good velocity off that push time.
Well, don't forget the Russia 2 and Russia 3 drivers, Abramovich and Kasjanov, disqualified from the 2-man race because the crews accidentally were given each other's sleds to drive. You are not allowed to change your sled during the competition deliberately or, I mean, it's never happened before, accidentally, so they have got a lot to prove.
Yeah, the coaches, I think, being given a bit of a hard time from the rest of the bobsleigh community and family for that mistake. 108.1, very good speed here. This is a great run from Dmitry Abramovich so far.
Abramovich building his experience as the weeks go by. Of course, like his compatriots, heading on Monday back home to Sochi in Russia.
145.1, great speed. This is a great run. Really nice parallel lines through this entire bottom portion of the track.
1800s off the lead. He's jumped right up to Francesco Friedrich and Rico Peter. 1800ths of a second, covering the top 3. Well, it is getting closer and closer and closer. And between him and Jürgen Loacker and Jan Vrba, who are tied for 4th now, just 700ths of a second as well.
Voyevoda is a beast on the back of the sled. He's a huge guy, and this crew drops in. Look at the synchronization of that load. That is exactly how you want to see it done in 4-man bobsleigh.
It's like somebody opens a trap door below them, just go ka-dunk straight into the sled.
That's what builds really great push velocity when you see the team jump into the sled like that at the same time. Great lines in the bottom of the track. You can see these Russians happy with that performance.
So they should. How an arm wrestling champion like Voyevoda gets to be such a fast sprinter, I have no idea. Next up, though, is Alexander Kasjanov, Petr Masayev, Max Belugin, and Kirill Antuk, a newer brakeman on the back of this Russia 2 sled. In the cap there, Pierre Luders, former Canadian driver, Olympic and World Championship medalist, and now coaching the Russians as they race up to Sochi's 2014 games. Not quite such a neat load. Another big start, 5:04 for the Russian sled.
And you can see 56.7 kilometers an hour is a velocity closer to the crew before with a slower push time, and that was because of the synchronization of the load. It's very important.
And they had a slightly better momentum. The others were at 56.5, but it didn't look like such a good load. They're a fraction behind. When they get to Sunny, will that change? 500s back.
Bit of a skid coming out of Sunny. Very small correction in that straightaway. This is going to be the deal breaker here in Horseshoe. He's going to have to build a lot of velocity to try catch up to these top sleds. 400s is very close. Nice speed. 107.9.
Their teammates had 108.1 and 145.1 at the bottom. Is Kasjanov going to be in front of Abramovich or behind him?
He's dropped 200ths of a second. It's very close here. He's back up to 400ths. This is going to be very close as he crosses the line.
This is going to put him into second place. It does. 300ths. That's 300ths off the lead. 100th in front of Rico Peter. What a close battle we've got on our hands here.
Good run here from this, actually the last two Russian sleds, really good run. As you mentioned before, redeeming themselves from a big mistake made in two-men where they were both disqualified. They came out here with a lot to prove, starting off this 4-heat competition with nice runs. This was a good line in Horseshoe, coming so close to that roof. You can see him accelerating, not turning his runners too much. 107.9, not the fastest speed, but enough to keep him in a very competitive race.
The late runners who may have been worried about the snow, all their prayers have been answered. It has barely snowed a flake since the start. And more noise at the top for our track record holder this season, Bert Hefti, Alex Baumann, Thomas Lamparter and Jürgen Egger, the A1 Swiss crew, behind their fastest driver.
They have the fastest push seen on the track here, getting into the 4-second mark. We're going to see how close they can do it here on this first heat.
Last World Championships here, Bert Hefti was the 4-man world champion, but as a brakeman, he starts 4:99, ties the track start record from this morning.
I expected to see a velocity over 57 kilometers an hour, and they didn't quite do it, and I think it's because the crew had a bit of trouble getting in. Push bars from the side pushers staying out as they came out of the first kink.
Better to leave them out and get through that first kink without a skid. That was the way they always did it in the old days. You'd see them loading down out of the kink into the straight.
Only 100th in the lead here, heading into Horseshoe. Be it Hefti, a very strong athlete, a lot of experience on this track. He's dropped 100th behind now.
Well, we saw the fastest speeds coming from Rico Peter, his teammate.
107.9 is the same velocity out of Horseshoe as Alexander Kasjanov from Russia that went before him.
Rico Peter had 108.5 and 145.4. We've seen a 145.6 from the Swiss. Hefti gets.
He's going to have to be perfect here. The velocity's not there in the bottom of the track. I don't think he's going to be able to do it.
Is he going to be in front of Rico Peter? He is. He's second by 100th of a second. Eric Alain goes, oh, that's close. Well, he somehow closed right towards the tail. Our top three, in fact, our top four sleds, Helen Upperton, covered by 400ths of a second. We're going to get some ties at the top of this pile.
I think so, too. This is a very precise track, very smooth driving. Small mistakes cost a lot. We're going to see tight times here for the majority of this competition. This is such a strong pushing crew. We saw their time, 4:99, the first team to push under 5 seconds, but a bit of a hard time getting in the sled. For me, they took too long to sit down. We saw that Russian crew drop into the sled so fast. They didn't have a velocity that matched the start speed.
Well, Jürgen Loacker with the best speed at the bottom. Rico Peter in the other Swiss sled, second fastest down at the bottom. But Hefti drove the last two corners to get within a whisker of the leader. Well, next up is Canada's lead driver, Lyndon Rush, with Jesse Wright, Lascelles Brown, Jesse Lumsden, Lascelles Brown and Neville Wright on the sleds. Sorry, Jesse. Another of my regular broadcast partners in the FIBT TV booth. Alongside me is Olympic medalist Helen Upperton from Canada.
Good load from this crew, 5:04 competitive push time. 56.9, the same push velocity as the Swiss team who had a faster start, so you can see how good that crew must have loaded to give Lyndon a good velocity as he heads through those straightaways.
The Canadians using Eurotech sleds, which use wire for steering rather than ropes, and that means that the handles are constantly in tension. We're talking movements of millimeters by the hands rather than centimeters to drive these.
Mark Vandenberg, the genius behind the Eurotech sleds, doesn't want any give. He wants less mistakes, less error from the material. And Lyndon Rush is the only guy driving a Eurotech 4-man. He's been testing the sled all year. He's had a bit of up and down, not the best season so far. They've got some new equipment they're testing this week. He's looking for a big result here in St. Moritz. This is a good run he's putting together so far.
100th off the lead from Horseshoe. What's he got at the bottom? 144.4. That's going to leave him very close to the leaders. Little rub on the wall. Third or fourth, fifth place. 500s cover the top 5 sleds.
So he's keeping it nice and close in a position to attack in the next 3 runs. These next couple runs from these tight sleds is going to be very exciting.
You cannot blink your eyes. You cannot start and stop a stopwatch in 5/100ths of a second. This is insanely tight.
I'm really impressed with the crew here. They gave Lyndon such a good chance through those long straightaways. You can see the drive from Lascelles Brown and Jesse Lumsden on the side. Neville Wright on the brakes, a very fast track and field 100-meter, 200-meter sprinter. Lyndon is a very experienced pilot. Nice parallel lines here as he comes down this bottom portion of the track. No big mistakes.
Lyndon watching the replay. Lascelles on the left, Neville in the centre, Jesse Lumsden with him there as Francesco Friedrich leads a massively tight first heat in the Bauhaus FIBT 4-man bobsleigh World Championships. Stephen Holcomb, the reigning 4-man world champion, with Justin Olsen, Steve Langton and Kurt Tomasevich on the sled. The night train has its first competitive run here in St. Moritz, and a 5-flat start time. That is massive. Holcomb...
57.1 velocity. Sorry, Martin, that's the fastest push velocity we've seen so far, and not the fastest time. Very experienced crew in this night train sled. That was a great load from those brakemen.
Holcomb really determined to win a world championship gold medal here in the home of ice sliding, not at home ice in Lake Placid.
That was a mistake out of Snake 2. He had a bit of a skid going into Sunny, and you don't want to make mistakes in the top portion of the track. This is where you build all your velocity. His crew gave him a great speed and a great time off the start. He's 600ths in the lead. Good speed, but not the fastest we've seen. We've seen sleds at 108 kilometers an hour and plus.
Well, let's see what this Bodine sled can produce. 3 different sleds being used by the 3 American crews. And Holcomb...
He's going to have to be perfect in the bottom of the track, and he's building on his lead.
This is great news for the USA. Stephen Holcomb, the defending champion, sets a new track record. He leads by 900ths of a second. That is the marker that the others now are going to have to look at.
That was a good job from Steve, correcting some mistakes that were made through the middle portion of the track. He had some trouble out of Snake 2, but he's a very experienced pilot. He's got a crew behind him that he's raced with so many times. They've got it down to a science, this team.
Well, 3 Olympic champions in that sled, and it really shows.
You can see the power that these athletes have. They load so efficiently and so well into this 4-man sled. This is the Snake combination here. He has some trouble off of Snake 2. You can see the sled skidding here a little bit sideways. That's a small error heading into Sunny, but he did a great job recovering in the bottom portion of the track to reel in those sleds.
He always appreciates the effort of his crew, and so will John Jackson of Great Britain. George, the 4-man, with Stu Benson, Bruce Tasker and Joel Fearon. These guys have been among the fastest starters every single time out in training. Fast start, a start record equaling 4:99 from Bert Hefti's crew.
Commands exchanged to maintain a very consistent impact on the sled over 50 meters. They've had great push times, but trouble loading. 4:99 is a fast start. I don't think the velocity is going to be there. 57.1, same as Holcomb's crew with a little bit of a faster push. So that means the USA team had a better load than the British.
Well, Jackson has a great opportunity to have a really big 4-man competition here.
You can see the British team has dropped into the red, and that's because of the velocity and the pushing and the loading of the crew heading through the wall curve.
700ths of a second behind leader Stephen Holcomb, the Olympic and world champion.
Bit of a low line through Horseshoe, but nice transition into Telephone and Shamrock.
107.7, same speed as Holcomb, so they're not going to close just yet. What can George find at the bottom? 800ths of a second. He is still in contention here.
He's going to have to be perfect in his bottom portion of the track.
Oh, big skid is going to cost him.
Yeah, a couple bends. He's heading uphill now through Martineau and Portago. He's going to drop some time.
Top 6 position, 8th place, 2900ths back, and that's a really disappointing second part of the track for John Jackson of Great Britain.
Yeah, they were poised in such a good position. They were so close to our leaders. They've dropped into this very tight pack of athletes that are hundreds off each other. This second heat is going to be very close and very exciting.
800ths away from the leader in Horseshoe, leaving him in 2nd or 3rd spot. Drifted away with mistakes at the fastest part of the track, Helen Upperton.
Yeah, you can see this is where the trouble starts. He brushes that wall. He's very close. He takes a bit too high of a line here. You can see he drops out of Sachs, hitting the wall, skidding into the left wall. You can see Pete Gunn a little bit frustrated with that mistake.
Well, disappointment too on the face of John Jackson, but 3 more runs here to really polish up their act. Well, next up is Thomas Florschutz of Germany, Andy Bredal, Ronnie Lisner, Thomas Blaszek, the crew. Spoke to him a couple of nights ago, having pizza out with his wife and his daughter. He was very, very relaxed, Thomas. And this perhaps might be his big stage. Race leader is Stephen Holcomb, the Olympic and world champion.
You can see 3 of the 4 athletes on this sled using the TPU Adidas technology in their speed suits. It's supposed to help with power output for running. It's tested in the Summer Olympic sprinting athletes. 56.9 kilometers an hour is not the fastest velocity, but it's enough to maybe see him stay competitive through this top portion of the track if his lines are smooth and they're parallel.
Well, let's see what happens in Snake. That's where Holcomb gave away some time. We could see him come again, a little wriggle, 900s back.
A bit of an early line from Snake 1 to Snake 2 and again into Sunny. Small skid out of the Sunny curve, but he's maintaining control of the sled. We're going to see what happens here in Horseshoe. He needs a very good exit. Close the gap by 100th of a second. Late entry into Devil's Dyke. These 4 right-hand combination curves are going to be a deal breaker here for Thomas Florschutz, building velocity in the bottom of the track.
10th at the start. He's in 2nd place at the moment. 600s back, 145.2, exactly the same speed as the night train. He will be in 2nd place by a fraction, 800ths of a second. 1st to 2nd, 900ths to 3rd, 10th of a second to 4th, 1200ths to 5th, and so on and so on and so on. This is just ridiculously competitive. This is only the first of 4 runs, Helen Upperton. I mean, this is going to get wild.
I actually don't expect to see the spread of times get any bigger over the next few heats. St. Moritz is a very precise track. It's going to be very small mistakes that cost 100ths of a second. This is the early transition into Snake 2. You can see him having to turn the sled abruptly, and again in Sunny, all these corners are about combinations. You have to develop the right transitions to keep maintaining your speed. 108.4, good velocity compared to our fastest sleds.
Christoph Langen, 2- and 4-man world champion in 2001 here. And there is his driver, Thomas Florschutz, hustled away by one of our broadcast partners at ZDF German television. Next up, Oskars Melbārdis, Damas Driskins, Askis Varsante, and Intos Dambis, and they get away very, very quickly. You see this sled still in primer. It's a development sled and a 495 getaway. They are the big starting crew in the field.
That is a huge push, and that's what we expect to see from this lap. Means they are the dominant force at the start. Great velocity, 57.3. They've set the benchmark for the push now, and all the rest of the teams are going to have to try and chase them down. This Latvian pilot is a little bit inexperienced, but he's going to continue to develop as a driver. I expect to see him be a threat more and more in these World Cups and World Championship events, and also heading into the Olympics next year in Sochi.
Well, this crew has such a great start. The only potential fly in the ointment for him will be consistency. 107.5, same speed almost as the leaders, but he's giving away time to Holcomb.
But not as much as we usually see. This is a great run from this Latvian crew here. He's going to have to do a great job in the bottom of the track.
He had 2 sleds to back-to-back test in training.
He's still in the green, though, 300ths of a second in the lead.
Can he lead at the line over the world champion? He does, 105.53. It's 200ths of a second, but he does have the lead.
That was a huge run from Oskars Melbārdis to stay in the lead. Typically with this driver, especially in format, he has a great push, slowly loses time because of his inexperience in the track. I think that they should be really proud of that first heat of this race. This is how you push a bobsleigh. These guys are unbelievable athletes. 495, huge push, 57.3 kilometers an hour heading into the 50-meter clock is an unbelievable velocity.
And yet they're still lifting it off the ice. There is still more perfection to come.
Doing a great job maintaining parallel lines, 145.1, competitive bottom speed. He's in a new sled. Maybe that's part of the difference maker, giving him some confidence in the track. 3 more runs to go. I'm interested to see how he finishes at the end of this. Consistency is the key in World Championships.
3 more runs, but first 3 more sleds in the first heat, of whom the next up is Alexander Zubkov, Alexei Negadailo, Dmitry Chenenkov and Maxim Makrusov are the crew. This is Russia 1 with the Valner sled. This man is Russia's massive hope for Olympic gold on the Sochi sliding track.
Alexander Zubkov having an unbelievable season in 4-man bobsleigh.
Great load from the crew, 498, quicker than the old start record, and they
huge
just dropped
velocity.
in.
That is a huge velocity with not the fastest speed. That's experience from the crew. That's how they've been so fast in the races so far. That push velocity is amazing. It gives Alexander Zubkov a lead through these top portion of the tracks, and with his driving experience, he's a very hard guy to beat in the 4-man. He's 600s in the lead right now.
Great through snake into sunny corner. Little bump there in Nash and Dixon, but he gets away and has the great line through Horseshoe.
Really good line in Horseshoe. Nice entry into Telephone. You can see how parallel he is. 108.8. Huge speed out of Horseshoe.
Best speed we have seen. Look at the lead.
Yeah, he's got a huge lead, over 2/10 of a second. I expect to see Alexander Zubkov lead after this first run. He was my prediction. He's got a quarter of a second, 154.4 kilometers an hour.
Well, that's fantastic speed, 90.5 miles an hour, and a new record to lead by a massive margin.
When we see so many sleds separated by hundredths of a second, Alexander Zubkov from Russia comes down with almost a 3/10 lead over the field. That is a huge run, and you can hear him celebrating.
Well, the brakeman and the driver know that was a massive start, and they gave him such velocity. And it's almost not this element, it's the load. Look at the way they drop in.
They didn't have the fastest time. The Latvians get those bragging rights, but they have the fastest velocity. That gave Alexander Zubkov the lead he needed. This was a phenomenal line through Horseshoe. It's what we expect from a pilot of Alexander Zubkov's caliber. 108.8, tied for the fastest speed.
The trouble for him is it's almost impossible to pick that apart and find somewhere to improve. They're just going to have to keep relentlessly banging in those speeds, and since he's fastest, perhaps that will be enough. Well, 2 sleds to go, both from Germany. Manuel Machata, Janis Becker, Jan Speer and Christian Poser are the first of our 2 German crews. Machata yet to win this season.
.503, and this is exactly where Machata's fallen behind. He's got a push bar out. He's got a push bar out as he heads through that first straightaway. That's a big mistake to make. He's going to have to try to catch up to Zubkov, who had a brilliant run.
Well, at the moment, he is 500ths of a second off the lead from the start, and that leaves you only 7th, so closest to company here. 2400s back, he's dropped to 8th position. This is not a good run so far from Mani Machata.
It's not so much the run as it was the load, the mistake with the push bar. You can make errors like that, especially when you're behind with the push time and the velocity.
Speed 108.7, it's a fraction slower than Zubkov, but it is the 2nd quickest we've seen. Here comes the FES sled.
Bit of a flop off of Devil's Dyke and Nameless. You could see a small skid. This is not a perfect run from Manuel Machata. He's going to need to clean this up over the next 3 heats.
4th place at the moment, 145.1, needs more speed than that. Francesco Friedrich did have more speed than that. Machata is just in front of Florschutz. He's the top German. German sleds 4th, 5th and 6th. Separated by only 500ths of a second over the 3 of them. That's how tough it is to get into a German team.
The German team's always very competitive, and we saw two of those guys in the third heats of the two-man race reel in the field and put themselves in medal contention position. This is where the trouble starts. The crew has a hard time getting in. The push bar is out. You're going to see it drag along the wall. That kills the speed and the time. He had no chance to catch the field with that mistake.
See him glance to the left there. He wondered what that was. He could feel the sled being pulled, literally pulled back.
You hear it and you feel it. He knew something had happened and something was wrong.
And here is our World Cup leader, Max Arndt. He's had 2 wins this season. One when Alexander Zubkov was absent, one when he was present. Zubkov is the standout driver in 4-man this year, though, with already 5 regular season wins. What can Arndt do here? Last sled in the first heat with Marco Hubenbecker, Alex Rödinger and Martin Putzer behind him.
We want to see these times below 5 seconds. They do it just barely. Let's see their velocity. It's going to be crucial. 57.3, very good velocity from this German crew.
Zubkov the fastest at 57.5, but Arndt is snapping at his heels already, just 1/100th of a second in it as they loaded. Again, watch the German heads, the helmets all in line. They used to do a system where they had Velcro on the helmet and on the suit of the guy in front to actually stick their heads together.
Skid through Nash-Dixon. He had a bit of trouble there through Nash-Dixon. We'll see if it's enough. It's 2/100ths of a second. This is 109.0. Huge speed.
Oh,
should
quicker
close
than the
the gap.
Russians. Zubkov had 1:45.5 at the bottom. Could we see a tie for the lead of this race? Arndt's got to be flawless here. This is looking really nice. The 2 best 4-man drivers this year. He's 100th in the lead, 1:45.9. Can he keep it to the line? He can, 1:05.21. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got an epic race on our hands here in St. Moritz, as we so often find. This is the blue ribbon event of ice sliding at the greatest track on the planet, and we have 5/100ths of a second between our top 2 sleds.
You're talking 5/100ths of a second, traveling over 145 kilometers an hour, 1,722 meters of ice they're covering. This is an unbelievable margin of time to be separated by. Great run from Arndt, great push, good velocity from his crew. You can see how powerful they are. They gave him a chance with the velocity. It's so important in how competitive this men's field is. We saw a small mistake through Nash and Dixon, but not enough. He had the best speed out of Horseshoe, great line out of Horseshoe, 109 kilometers per hour is the best we saw.
Just 2 standout drives from Arndt and Zubkov, and a huge jawohl from Christoph Langen. To see the German sled in the lead after the first heat by a few 100ths of a second is enough. And there is Max Arndt. He looks pretty happy with that. Confirmation then of the standings after the first of 4 heats of the Bauhaus FIBT 4-man bobsleigh World Championships. Max Arndt to Germany by a whisker over Alexander Zubkov, and look how tight it is behind. Oskars Melbārdis leading a pack that could not be tighter if they were in a deck of cards. Ridiculous speeds from the bobsleighs today. All 34 sleds down safely and ready to rock this St. Moritz track in their second heat. The snow continues to drift down, and among the friends and fans, you can see former drivers and athletes dotted around, watching down there at Horseshoe and everywhere else on this historic St. Moritz track. So join Helen Upperton and me, Martin Haven, for the second of our 4 heats as we continue with the action here in the 4-man World Championships at St. Moritz. We'll be back.